Overlord Volume 7 Chapter 2 Chapter 02 Butterfly Entangled in a Spider's Web, translated by Nigel Proofreader/Editor. Deus Ex Machina Part 1. The sun had not yet risen, but there were already quite a number of workers gathered in the Count's courtyard. The last people to arrive were Hecarim and the members of Foresight, for a total of 18 people. All of the people gathered for this job were capable workers within the Imperial capital. Each team kept a fixed distance from the others, and at the same time they sized each other up warily, so the fact that every single eye went to the members of Foresight as they arrived last was quite an intimidating sight. Ah, there's a few familiar faces. Speaking of which, didn't we meet that stag beetle at the Katsa Plains? Strange, didn't I mention it at the inn? Gringham's team was hired too. What, I didn't tell you. I have the feeling that I brought it up. In any case, as you can see, all the notable workers in the Empire are gathered under one roof. A warm round of applause for our client's ample finances. We can dispense with the applause, I think. Let's leave that aside for now. The ones over there should be the team leaders. Everyone present was divided into their teams, and among them, a group of 3 people were discussing information. Gringham's there too, right? Okay, I'll go over to say hi. You got that bastard's here too? Seriously? Then, those elf girls must be. This is terrible. Die, you son of a bitch. Imina muttered bitterly to herself. She might have been keeping her voice down, but Hecarim and the others still panicked as they surveyed their surroundings for signs of hostility/Imina-san. I know, Rober. He's a colleague for the duration of this job, after all, but I just wish I didn't have to see his face. I don't like him either. If you want to talk about whether or not we like him, then I hate him too, but you need to mind your attitude. A look of "you're really annoying" came over Imina's face. Hecarim came between her and Roberdick, then smiled mischievously as he shrugged. Hey, I'm going over to greet him. Don't say annoying things like that. What if I end up showing it on my face? Work hard, leader. After hearing Roberdick cheer him on, Hecarim deliberately scrunched up his face and grumbled, those two talk like it doesn't concern them, and then went over to the group of 3 people. The first to greet Hecarim as he walked over was a worker in a suit of steel-colored full-plate armor. Due to the strange, rounded structure of the plates and the curiously oversized pauldrons, he did not look like a human being so much as a beetle standing on 2 legs. A large horn stuck straight out of his helmet, a sign that he was deliberately cultivating that image. However, the part after that was not intentional. The man's legs were very short, so he looked like a stag beetle that a child had deliberately forced to stand on its hind legs. A nicer way of putting it would be to say that his short, stumpy legs stood securely upon the ground, and he had a dwarven physique that was well suited to being a warrior. As I expected, thou camest too, Hecarim. Yes, Gringam. I thought the terms this time round weren't too bad. Hecarim waved to the other 2 people. His attitude was hardly dignified, but neither of them looked unhappy. This was because the 4 of them might have been of different ages, and had different experiences, but they were equally skilled as workers. So your guys. Hecarim glanced at Gringham's team and counted them before replying. There's only 5 of you. What happened to the other members? They are taking their rest, and alleviating their fatigue. In addition, they worked the same assignment as myself, and now they must repair or replace their damaged or destroyed panoply. This man, Gringam, led the team called Heavy Masher, a large worker team with 14 members. There were merits in having numbers on one's side. One of them was the ability to approach a job from many different angles, which gave one many ways to handle a job. In particular, the ability to recombine into a team that could take on any request was a great boon. However, that approach also contained demerits. One of them was the fact that payment was divided among the number of people, and so each individual would be paid less. The second flaw was that deciding something would take a very long time, which led to slow movements. After adding up the pros and cons, the fact that this man could group up workers, and their tendency to break apart based on personality conflicts, and then go one step further to perfectly control them was a sign of his great skill as a manager. Oh, that's tough. Although, why don't you act as our support, so the friends you left behind won't end up hating you for earning too much? Utter foolery. As a leader in mine own right, the task falls to me to assuage the underlings once the task is concluded. Regretfully, our band must seek the best possible outcome for ourselves. Oi, don't be like that. I'm just saying that it'll be fine if you speak normally around us. Gringam smiled thinly. Hecarin saw that he did not agree, and so he shrugged and turned to the other man. This is the first time I've spoken face to face with you. He extended a hand to the other man as a show of respect, and that man took it. His was a sturdy and strong hand. His narrowed eyes flickered, then focused on Hecarin. Foresight. I've heard of you. His voice was as clear as a bell. One could say it fit his appearance very well. You too, Tenbo. There was nobody who did not know of this genius swordsman, who was undefeated in the arena. This man's team, Tenbo, was essentially a team composed of one man, to some extent. However, that was also why Imina's face contorted with disgust. I'm glad to be able to team up with a sword genius who can rival the mightiest warrior of the kingdom, the great Gazef Stronov. Thank you. However, shouldn't you say that he can rival me, Aria Uzrith? Oh, bold words. Aria smiled coldly, an arrogant look on his face. After seeing his expression, Hecarin blinked several times to hide the emotion he had nearly revealed. Well then, I look forward to seeing your swordsmanship on full display in the ruins. Yes. You can leave that to me. I hope there'll be a monster in those ruins who can give me a challenge. Aria patted the weapon at his side. We don't know what kind of monster may emerge. For all we know, we might even encounter a dragon. Now that would be a frightening sight. Perhaps a powerful monster like a dragon might challenge me. However, I'll win in the end. Really now, Hecarin smiled, albeit on the surface. He glanced to see the reaction of the last person, and worked to suppress his own feelings. He recalled a rumor going around that in swordsmanship alone, Aria was more than a match even for an orichalcum-ranked adventurer, so perhaps that answer of his was no idle boast. In addition, confidence in his own abilities was a good thing. Bragging was very important for workers. Of course, that was as long as he did not take it too far. Dragons were the mightiest species on the world. They soared through the sky and expelled ruinous breath from their maws. Their scales were sturdy and their physical attributes were extraordinary. Old dragons could even use magic. They possessed a lifespan incomparable to those of human beings, and even a sage would have to admit defeat to their accumulated wisdom. Due to their power, stories frequently depicted them as wicked foes, or beings who lent a hand to heroes. The objective of the 13 heroes' last adventure was the dragon known as the Divine Dragon. In much the same way, the final adversary of a hero was often one of the draconic race. It was quite startling how he could compare himself to such a powerful being and act so cockily, even if it was idle banter. His swaggering tone sounded like he was joking, but unfortunately Aria's eyes were serious. How full of himself was he? Nobody knew what sort of monsters lay within the ruins they would soon be visiting. He predicted that Aria's mental state was very dangerous, and might end up dragging down everybody else as well. That ought to be the case. I'd better stay away from him. It was his own business if he wanted to die, but it would be troublesome if he came over to beg for help. Hecarin smiled to him, and having made that decision, he amended his approach to Aria. Now he would be used and then discarded. And the people over there should be the members of Foresight. Oya. A look of disdain and scorn filled Aria's eyes the moment he saw Imina. Apparently, Aria had been born in the religious nation that revered humanity as the greatest of all races, the slain theocracy. The citizens of that country often viewed people with non-human ancestry as second-class citizens. From that man's point of view, having a half-elf like Imina working on an even basis with him must be very upsetting. That part of him lends truth to the rumors, however. If he really was born in the theocracy, then he ought to have a baptismal name. There's also a rumor that he abandoned his baptismal name. Hecarim grumbled in his heart, and just to be sure, he muttered, "Oi oi, hands off my buddies, okay?" Of course. For the duration of this job, we are all comrades. I will work together with you. I would very much like to believe those words. This man Arya was like a strong kid who had directly become an adult. He unnerved others, or rather, he was mentally unbalanced to some extent. The mood around him was distasteful to others, and even after reminding him, Hecarim could not find it in himself to relax. Oh yes, please believe me. Now then, let's return to the previous topic. In any event, I'd like to turn overall command of the expeditions to someone else. Provided it's not too troubling, I will obey the instructions of all the other members. Feel free to use me as a vanguard during battle. I will cut down all the foes before us with this blade. All right, understood. In that case, I'll be returning to my team. Let me know if there's anything. Arya bowed, and then left. As he saw the women waiting for Arya, Hecarim's face twisted for a moment. However, he could not let his feelings be written on his face. Allowing others to know how he felt might occasionally prove disadvantageous, and someone like that was not fit to lead a team. He quelled his emotions, and hid his expression. He turned away, like he had seen something filthy, and greeted the last person. Greetings, honored elder. You're as healthy as ever. Hoy, Hecarim. You seem well. He wheezed whenever he spoke, because almost all his front teeth had fallen out. He was Palpatra Greenleaf Ogrian. The source of his nickname was the suit of armor he wore, which resembled green leaves glistening with morning dew. That armor was not made of metal, but the scales of a green dragon. Palpatra and his team had once succeeded in a dragon hunt. Of course, it was not a very big dragon, but even a small dragon was not a foe which an average worker or adventurer could handle. Palpatra was an old man who was in his 80th year of life. Usually, people in this line of work retired after the age of 45. There were also some who would retire in their early 40s. Very few people remained as adventurers after the age of 50. The people who worked such a cruel job where death was a very real danger, could not ignore the effects of age withering their bodies. In truth, Palpatra was an exception, but his strength had deteriorated greatly from when he was in his prime, apparently, when he had reached the level of the Orichalcum ranked. Even so, Palpatra refused to step down from the front lines. Palpatra, and the way he continued adventuring despite his advanced age, was an object of admiration for many people in the field. Still, he seems a little dangerous. Even more wrinkles appeared on Palpatra's already wrinkled face, and he lowered his voice, a gesture of which Hecarim approved. Yes. If he wants to die, that's his problem, but I'd rather not go down with him as well. Granted, he is very strong, but excessive confidence might end up endangering his compatriots. He is extremely dangerous. Gringam seemed to be muttering something along the lines of how troublesome. After seeing Arya's attitude, probably all the workers were thinking the same thing. Actually, how strong is he? I haven't been to the arena in a while. Knowest thou not? I am aware, is it not the same for thee, revered elder? I've only heard of his prowess, but I haven't actually seen it with my own eyes. Perhaps I could ask my companions. However, when we get down to it, what are we going to use as a benchmark for strength? For instance, if we used Gazef Stronov as an upper limit, then where would something we were more familiar with, like say, the Empire's 4 knights stand on that scale? The knights, who are also known as Heavy Explosion, the Immovable, Lightning Bolt and Violent Gale, using them as a benchmark only complicates things. The 4 of them ought to be inferior to that great man, to the kingdom's warrior captain, but then, the days of Gazef Stronov towering over the common herd are a thing of the past. As time goes by, new powerful warriors will emerge. So you want to say Uzrith is one of them, that he's really that strong? Besides, I've never seen the power of the 4 knights up close, the strongest person I've seen is probably the leader of the Platinum Imperial Guard, who answered directly to the Emperor himself. That man's skill is quite something. As I recall, he's on par with the Four Knights. The mightiest entities I know of are the Dragon Lords of the Council Alliance. Humanity cannot defeat foes like those. Some say there's 5 of them, others say there's 7. We're looking for a way to gauge Uzratha's strength. Please limit yourself to human swordsmen. That said, the Grand Council Alliance's swordsmen are almost all demi-humans, so we'll have to count them out as well. The Martial Lord of the Arena is the same way. Then I'll cite the Lady Paladin of the Roble Holy Kingdom, who wields a holy sword. That said, she does seem somewhat inadequate in terms of pure swordsmanship. Collecting information on mighty individuals was very important for a worker, when it came to handling jobs. That was because the presence or absence of such information often determined victory or defeat. And of course, that aside, they were all warriors, and they could not help but want to know more about people who inhabited the world of martial arts with them. It was the same now. The conversation had started by discussing Aria's strength, but things had gotten more and more heated, and it became something like a swap meet for news about powerful beings. It was like a group of kids arguing about who was strongest. The slain theocracies people tend to be of a uniformly high level, but I haven't heard of any particularly outstanding individuals among them. Then again, even if they were, divine magic casters are outside the scope of this discussion. I heard there's a female warrior in the kingdom's highest-ranked adventurer team. What of her? The no breasts, just pecs one, am I right? She's very strong. Although, I heard that she lost a duel with the warrior captain. I heard an adventurer addressed her with that made-up nickname, and got beaten half to death. Ha ha ha, what a frightening young lady. After mentioning the names of the strong, I've come to realize that there aren't many powerful pure swordsmen. There's Dark Knight of the heroes of the City-State Alliance. Then there's Flash Cerebrate of the Draconic Kingdom's Adamantite-ranked adventurer team Crystal Tear, as well as Crimson Optics of the worker team Blazing Inferno, and then the kingdom's Brain Unglaus. The conversation stopped here for the first time. Brain Unglaus? Who's he? Palpatra directed that puzzled question at Gringam. Dost thou not know, revered elder? That man is a famed swordsman of the kingdom. What about thee? Hecarim shook his head in response to that question. He had never heard that name before. Verily, all of thee know not. Gringam could not hide the look of disappointment on his face. Then, he spoke in a voice that lacked confidence, like he was perusing memories of the past. This is a matter of years gone by, when I once took part in the kingdom's grand martial tournament. During the semi-finals, I had the privilege of measuring his blade skills a measure. At that time, mine abilities could not hope to compare to his. You're talking about the tournament which Gazef Stronov won, right? Indeed. In the end, Unglaus met defeat at Stronov's hands, but the battle of those contenders was truly a sight to behold. They were paragons of swordsmanship both. How did he deflect that flash of light? And being able to strike with but a single curve of the blade under those circumstances, mine eyes were opened upon witnessing such sights and more. Given the way Gringam was gushing with praise for him, and the fact that he could fight evenly with Gazef Stronov, the mightiest warrior of the surrounding nations, it was clear that his strength must have been top-rate. So it was just that he did not know that the world contained such skilled exponents. Hecarim was filled with awe. Then, who do you think is stronger, between that Unglaus chap and Uzrath? Uzrath, Gringam answered without any delay. If he had to battle Unglaus from the Grand Martial Tournament, it would definitely be him. I witnessed a fight of his in the arena recently, and I am certain of it, so that means he can stand on par with the warrior captain from several years ago? Is he really that strong? Oh my! Hecarim had exclaimed in a moment of excitement, and he hurriedly lowered his volume. I see, Unglaus, is it? Looks like I'll have to pay attention to news from the kingdom. All right, have you two heard of it? That there's a third Adamantite-ranked adventurer team in the kingdom? Of course I have. Pardon me, I haven't. Hecarim, ignorance will endanger thy team. I know that, but I just don't have the money to gather information about our friends in the kingdom. I can't spare the cash. Hayayahia, how bold. I do not dislike such courage. Revered elder, I seek your opinion on a certain matter. Having heard the rumors of darkness Mammon, do you not feel they are far too exaggerated? They say the two of them slew a gigant basilisk, without the aid of a healer. Yuwa, it ought to be just a rumor. Such a mighty foe, a gigant basilisk, could not be felled by just two people, not even if they were adamantite ranked. Thou agreest with me then, Hecarim? The more news I gather, the more dubious the provenance of such. It has even reached mine ears that during the great uproar in the kingdom, he dispatched a fiend of well over 200 difficulty in, but a single blow, to me, that might be a fabrication concocted by the Adventurers Guild of the kingdom to frighten those within, and without the nation, and thus they granted those people the rank of adamantite. That's possible. After all, the birth of a high-ranking adventurer is a momentous occasion. Still, would the guild tell such lies? The guild is quite stubborn about the way they do things. The guildmaster of each city handles things differently. The guildmaster from my adventuring days was filth. So I punched him right in the face. Hayayahia. I'm a worker now, thanks to that. Palpatra laughed loudly, and with good cheer. His reasons for becoming an adventurer were well known. Anyone in the business within the imperial capital would have heard of it. Palpatra would repeatedly recount the incident whenever he sat down to drink. That said, I feel the guild wouldn't do something like that. So you think it's true then? It's hard to believe. Even if you viewed it in the most generous terms, a difficulty of 200, that number alone is suspicious. Any foe who was that powerful could not possibly be felled in a single blow. I think that part was an exaggeration that was deliberately spread. If an extremely high difficulty demon really did show up, they probably engaged it with multiple teams, and then had darkness deal at the finishing blow. That sounds more likely. Well, if you counted all the adventurers who were stronger than Orichalcum rank as being adamantite rank, I could believe such a mighty warrior existed. After all, adamantite rank can cover a very broad range. Hecarim and I are of one mind, but thou feelest it is true, do you not, revered elder? Hayayahia. I don't consider it to be entirely true either. Seeing is believing, as they say. I wish we could meet the man himself, then again, maybe not. Just as the other two were expressing their agreement with Hecarim, they heard the sound of flesh striking flesh, followed by a woman trying to bite back a scream of pain. All the workers present turned their eyes onto the same spot. Several of them had already lowered themselves into battle-ready stances, believing something had happened. The source of the scream lay before Aria, one of his female companions, who lay upon the ground. Judging by the circumstances, Aria had probably punched her. The woman looked up at Aria's face, which was twisted in anger. Her own face was filled with fear as she begged pathetically for forgiveness. Hecarim fought back a rising wave of nausea, and a thought flashed through his mind. He hurriedly turned his attention towards his companion Imina. Just as he had imagined, her face had gone blank. There was a dangerous air around her, as though she would launch an attack if things went any further. Hecarim hurriedly signaled to Roberdick and Archie who were standing beside her, telling them to hold her back. Personally speaking, Hecarim was as angry as Imina was. However, he could not stick his nose into the problems of other teams. Of course, he could do so if he wanted. However, if he did, he would need to be prepared to bear all the consequences of that choice. That was the reason why the other teams simply wrinkled their brows in displeasure, but none of them made a move. Imina's reason eventually overcame her desire to fight, and she spat on the ground after directing a lewd gesture at his back. The only thing he has that's comparable to the kingdom's warrior captain is his swordsmanship. It would be wonderful if his character were similar to his as well, but I guess that's too much to ask for. Alright, we'll stop here for now. Indeed. Since Hecarim's here too, let's decide the most important thing. That man refused, so who'll be our overall leader? The three of them fell silent. There were 4 teams present here. While all of them possessed ample fighting power, without someone to coordinate and lead everyone, they would not be able to take effective action. It was like having many arms but being unable to use them all at the same time, little different from only having one. Being able to make effective use of a team of strong personalities was not an easy task, and doing so without complaints from anybody was even more difficult. If the instructions resulted in failure, or if others thought that one was placing their own team's gain above their own, it would incur the wrath of the other teams. Frankly speaking, the position demanded excellent skills, yet there were more demerits than merits to taking it. Every team leader understood that point, so they all remained silent while watching each other's faces. Each of them wanted to dump this burden onto the first person to open their mouth. After about a minute's silence, Hecarim tiredly suggested, "Honestly, we don't need an overall leader, do we? That's just delaying the inevitable. It'll be troublesome once fighting breaks out. Mine idea is that we should alternate. That way resentment will not accrue. I feel we may discuss the matter at greater length upon reaching the ruins." You do have a point. Both of them approved of Gringham's suggestion. In that case, we'll go in order of when we arrive there. How about Uzrath and his Tenbo? It's fine if we skip that punk. Besides, he won't be able to do it. I agree, revered elder. Then, as the one who proposed it, my heavy masher shall take the lead. I'm counting on you, Gringam. Please do, young man. Understood. That said, there will hardly be any vicious monsters within the Empire. The problem lies within the kingdom. A situation may arise once we draw near the Great Forest. If I'd known I'd have reversed the order. Hecarim made a show of grabbing his head in mock regret, while the other two smiled quietly. After that, they immediately quelled their facial expressions and turned to look at a man who was walking towards the workers. The surrounding workers had already turned to face him. The Count's butler walked proudly through the courtyard that was dimly lit by the brightening sky, with a pose that befitted a servant of a count. He arrived before the workers and bowed. Nobody responded to it, but he did not mind, instead opening his mouth and saying, "It is time. My thanks to everyone for accepting my lord's request. We shall dispatch 2 drivers with you and 6 adventurers as an escort. The objective is an unexplored ruin within the kingdom, very likely to be a tomb, from the structure of it. The duration of the expedition will be 3 days, and the bonus will be awarded based on what my master learns, so we will arrange later on. Are there any questions?" The butler had said the same thing as the employment request. The only difference was probably the presence of adventurers as bodyguards. They wanted to know how the Count had learned about the ruins, but the workers knew which questions could be answered, and which questions could not. If their employer was willing to tell them, then he would have said so when hiring them. Besides, if this job was really so clear-cut and above-board, adventurers could take care of it. Since it was dirty work, the employer had to keep quiet, and so not asking would be safer. In that case, I shall take you all to your awaiting carriages. Nobody objected, and so everyone followed behind him. Hecarim and the rest of Foresight were at the end of the group. That fucking son of a bitch, why isn't he dead yet? How about it, want to kill him? Imina could not tolerate Aria, and she whispered her displeasure into Hecarim's ear the moment she was beside him, in order to vent her anger. Her voice was very